start recording. Right. So I'm going to ask you a poll. You've got a plug flow reactor. So you've got gas flowing in and out, and you've got no backing. So it's not a packed bed reactor, right? So you don't have those pebbles in there or the catalyst particles through which the gas stream must find its way. And you've got this reaction that's going to take place in your reaction. You've got A, and it is going to form 2B and C. Right, and everything is going to be in the gas phase, right? So my poll question is, and I want you to think about it, so I want you to give option 1. Okay, let me just, so my question is, the inlet pressure is, let's say, 5 atmospheres, like in our tutorial problem. And I want you to think about what the outlet pressure will be relative to the inlet pressure. Option 1 is this outlet pressure will be higher than the inlet pressure. And option 2 is the outlet pressure will be lower than the inlet pressure. So we've got this weird habit, and since Sika in days, that we use this zero sign, which can be confusing with outlet, but I assume you're used to it now. So let me just get the poll up. Poll, multiple choice, and start the poll. Right, please participate. Thank you. Let's give 5 more seconds. So please get your votes in. And I can't see who's voting what, so don't worry about it. I don't know whether you can see who's voting for which option. So no fear. Just get your votes up. 8 people, 7 people, 6 people are changing their minds. 5 more people must vote. 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, so let's just show the responses. And now this whole poll is over. So 21 voted for 2 and 14 for option 1. Okay, so there are still a significant percentage of the class that has a misconception about this. And the problem is that you know the ideal gas too well. This is what is happening in a plug flow reactor with gas in a pipe. If you have a gas flowing, right? And our plug flow reactors will be relatively short pipelines. So relatively short is like 5 meters, 3 meters, compared to a big piping system where you have hundreds of meters. So if you just have a gas flowing through such a short meter, even if the the velocity is relatively high, frictional pressure losses, so delta PF, those ones, I think you use the isothermal model and the adiabatic model to compensate for frictional losses in a gas flow medium. This we can assume is pretty much negligible for our purposes. Really, a gas that flows in an open pipe over the distances that we are going to be concerned with is pretty much negligible. So we can neglect friction. And now the temptation is to say, all right, but the number of moles is going to increase. So my FT at the outlet is going to be more than the FT at the inlet. So if I think of my ideal gas law, the pressure must increase, but that is incorrect. Which variable in your ideal gas law will increase? Which variable will increase? Can somebody type? In the ideal gas law, let's just, thank you, Roger. Yes, so the volumetric flow rate is going to increase. The stuff will speed up. You will not get, never, ever, 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 ever in your life, if you do not have a pump or a compressor, you will not see an increase in pressure in a flowing stream. You will not. Because otherwise, if this pressure here is higher than the pressure at the inlet, there will not be flow. The driving force to drive flow from this side to that side is the fact that there's a pressure differential. So there must be this pressure at the outlet here. I'm going to clean up this slide now. The pressure at the outlet here must always be less than that there's to drive the flow to go in that direction. And what will happen, what will happen over here is that because I've got an increase, because I've got an increase in Ft. So if I look at this is the one thing that is going to vary then. Q is equal to Ft RT over the pressure. And if I have an open pipe, just like a PFR, we are going to make the assumption that pressure in is pretty much equal to pressure out. However, if we have this back bed, that we considered and for which we are now applying the Ergen equation. You can imagine the poor gas must now go all the way. So the path that it must follow is now very tortuous and it collides every time with all these little particles and then running into it. It's a very stupid kind of mindless running into and then going around, running into and then going around. And that costs energy. And that energy we see in the energy density. So you must realize pressure, remember from CTD, well, if you must remember everything you've learned in this course, you are superhuman. But pressure is actually an energy density. Pressure is an energy density, kilojoules per cubic meter. So you lose that energy density that's part of the enthalpy because of the frictional pressure losses. And for that, for this loss from pressure in to pressure out, that must decrease. That pressure must always decrease. I can't use the ideal gas law. I must use a differential equation, and that is our, hopefully at this stage, beloved Ergen equation. Questions on this? Put up your hands if you've got a question and you're typing and I'm moving on too fast. Yes, Sean? Do you want to speak or you want to type? Okay, cool, type away. What can I do while you are typing? I can speak more about the Ergen equation and what I've seen, errors, the Ergen equation. Listen, you must really, if you check, print that K value, see whether you've got realistic answers for each of your variables. If you calculate the gas density and you get a value of 1,235 kilograms per cubic meter for a gas, that is incorrect. Right, so check, break your equation into incremental pieces so that you don't have a big K value. Do we assume? Yes, that is absolutely what I am saying. So for a plug flow reactor, Sean is asking for a PFR, do we assume that the pressure drop is minimal over that equation? Absolutely. We are going to ignore it. And so if you, for instance, if you want to operate a compressor, so your, let me just get some new space here. If you have a plug flow reactor with a gas and you want to operate that reactor at a high pressure, and why would you want to operate at a high pressure? Think about it. Why would you want to operate any reactor at a high pressure? Pressure costs you. While I'm talking, think about it, and then you can type your answers. No? If you have, so in order to achieve a high pressure there, you can have a compressor that you are going to size just like we've done in CTD. So you're going to say, I've got a gas stream, it flows at a certain flow rate, it comes in at atmospheric conditions. I want to operate there at 5 atmospheres. This is where you're going to have a huge delta P and where you are going to pay for the energy. But the pressure losses then in that plug flow reactor is pretty much compared to this huge increase, it's going to be 20 kilopascals or at most 50, you know, it's almost nothing. So, Sean, very long answer to your short question is, if I have a plug flow reactor, in other words, with a gas phase, and I don't have any packing there, we make the assumption, so for a PFR, Pn is equal to pressure out. And I can use my ideal gas law then to calculate, just like you've done in CKN, I can use that to calculate my change in volumetric flow rate. That thing, it's going to speed up or slow down. So it's going to, the linear velocity is going to change along the length of that thing. This is then going to be a constant that I can have outside of my differential equations. Why would I want to operate at high pressures in a reactor if I have a gas phase? Anyone? It increases the concentration, absolutely. And that you've been doing, that 1.2, that 1.2, you're not doing it for your health benefits. I'm sure some of you have experienced ill health effects by doing that, but once you get it right, it's the best feeling in the world. Now there are better feelings, but it's a good feeling. Right, so if you have 1.2 and that, if you think about that right expression, okay, so listen, Yuri, first, right, okay, the right is directly proportional to the partial pressure of a component, sorry, of my reactants. And the partial pressure of that, so this is the partial pressure of one of my reactants, as you've seen in the TAT. So the right is directly proportional to your pressure. K equilibrium is a constant, which is only a function of temperature, right? It is only a function of temperature. So we are going to explore, so you are not changing your equilibrium constants by changing the pressure. I can change my equilibrium composition. So of course your pressure and your temperature is something that you will play with when you are going to design your reactors. But in general, higher pressures, higher rates. And that will go for all your reactions, whether it's the forward reaction or the reverse reaction. The higher pressure will increase the rates. Okay, but we are going to have a nice few weeks having fun with equilibrium reactions. Okay, more questions? Okay, so now let me share then a slide. Okay, so let me briefly discuss the semi-batch reactor. I'm not going to even going to share the slides. I'm just going to tell you frequently made mistakes. And if you look at this slide, I show the Vogler approach where we want to write everything in terms of how does the concentration change here versus time, because that's generally what you will plot. You will plot a concentration with versus time in your semi-batch reactor, and you will have CB versus time for the semi-batch reactor. So you want to plot concentrations, and the temptation is then to set up all your differential equations as a function of concentration. And for a semi-batch reactor, I've seen many people getting seriously confused when they use concentrations, because I have a concentration here, which is my inlet concentration. I will have feed concentrations in my feed stream, and they will flow at a flow rate. So that will give me the inlet flow rate of A and the inlet flow rate of B. In the meantime, back at the range, I have concentrations in here. Okay, let me get the nice purple. There we go. That's got CA that is changing with time and CB that is changing with time. And they've got values at time is equal to 0. Time is equal to 0. So this and that should not be confused. And the easiest way for me to avoid that confusion is to just revert to the mole balances, is to say, what is actually in the mole balances? It is not concentrations, it is moles in the mole balances. How does the number of moles of A change inside my control volume? right? And that is equal to what is coming in of A, what is going out, and in this case it is 0, so there's nothing going out, plus what is the rate in which A is formed or consumed, and of course the sign of your rate equation will fix that, multiplied by whatever is the volume there. But now this volume is also something that is changing. So I need the concentration in here only to calculate the rates. So when I set up, now my eraser is going to make everything disappear. Sorry, so I'm going to have to rewrite everything. So I'm out of space. Sorry, the blackboard is fantastic, but their eraser needs some serious work. You can earn lots of money if you can fix their eraser, please. So we've got this in there, and I now am busy writing. Sorry for shouting in your ears. All right, so there we go. We've got our reactor, we've got FA0, FB0 coming in, okay? And we've got number of moles of A and number of moles of B that is changing. And I am now going to write my mole balance just for component A. DNA is going to be everything that is coming in minus FA that is going out. And for this example that I've drawn, I'm not going to take off anything, or A times the volume. But this volume is now also a dependent variable. Okay? Of course, my independent variable in this case is time. Okay, so if I now look at my equations, what I would like to calculate is if I set up differential equations in Python. So my independent variable will be time, and I'm going to have all my dependent variables, and my dependent variables in this case is going to be NA, NB, and the volume that is going to change with time. Right, so this is what I recommend. Then we cannot get confused, because for each of them, I now need to write a differential equation. So this differential equation, this one over here, is the one that I'm going to use for NA, and I can write one for NB, and I can write one for the volume. But in my function now, I see, I need a rate here. Here I need a rate, so let me get an equation for the rate of A. So let's say it's minus K, CA, CB. Now say, oops, a daisy, there are some more dependent variables, but I'm not scared because I can calculate CA as NA divided by the volume. Right, and I can calculate CB as NB divided by the volume. And now these two, don't confuse me because they are outside of my differential equation. So as soon as I type this equation in, I evaluate, do I have this somewhere either as a parameter or a design spec? Yes, check. Do I have this somewhere? Oh no, I need an algebraic equation for that. Cool, I've got this algebraic equation. Oh my goodness, two more unknowns pop up. But it's okay, it is a function of the variables for which I have slopes or differential equations, so I can calculate CA and CB, etc., etc. So I really recommend for semi-batch reactors is to not to confuse yourselves with concentration where that I must initialize, which one must I initialize. So now it's easy for me if I have my initial variables as NA naught, NB naught, and the initial volume. So for the rest, I assume you should be okay if you watch the videos and play around with that. But my recommendation is concentration. I don't want to see concentration really as a differential equation that you try to return. It creates havoc, especially later on when I am going to give you reactors where I separate stuff out, or we've got gas phase reactions, concentration as your variable. You can always calculate, you need concentration because you need it in the rate, but you can calculate it every time you need it just by having the variable there and the volume if you've got a batch reactor. Or if you've got a PFR, it's going to be the flow molar flow rate divided by the volumetric flow rate. And this thing can change and that thing can change along the length of your reactor. Right, so questions on that? Let me see. Put up a hand if you want to type. I see no hands. If you want to speak, you are also welcome to speak, of course. Crystal clear. Right. Okay, so let me then share my slide for the multiple reactions. And I know you've done this in CKN. Multiple reactions. Slide. Share now. Drink. Oh, yucky. This looks horrible on my video. Let's just see. Do you have double vision as well? Can you see? Does it look horrible on your screens? Okay. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let me try. Fortunately, you know, I'm one of those people who I like belt and suspenders. I've got the PDF version here as well. So I am prepared for this Blackboard inefficiencies. Okay, let's see this. I'm going to have to zoom into. How does this look? Can you see this better? Okay, can you see this better, anyone? Thank you. Right. Okay, so let me just clear that. There we go. I like it. You know, at least now there are people in the room. Okay, let me close this. So now I asked you a series of questions regarding dependent and independent variables. And what I would like to do is just briefly, for those of you, I know some of you in the room who probably didn't get a chance to glance at the slide, and some people who did. But if you now look at this whole sequence of reactions. So if I look at component A, it reacts in reaction 1 and it reacts in reaction 2. Okay, and some other components, let's just check, and E gets formed here, but it gets consumed in reaction 3. So I assume you are comfortable with writing the mole balances for these equations, dFi, and this is a packed bed, so I'm going to use W as my independent variable, right? So if I have dFi, dW, I assume you are comfortable saying it's going to be whatever happens in RA1 and whatever happens in RA2. Kaddish. Happy? Right. And if I now, for instance, write the mole balance for component E, I need to relate its stoichiometry. So this is just double 2 or no, sorry, so that or I was given. So let me just not confuse you. The rate at which I disappears in reaction 2 was given. So even though there's a 2 there, this rate is already given the disappearance of rate 2. So what I should actually do if I analyze this reaction is I should say A goes to half E plus 5 over 2F, because I've got the rate of disappearance of A on its own. Okay, so that is how you will relate the stoichiometry there to RA2. Okay, so I'm going to have the eraser in here just to see. Let's just look at E now. If I look at E, so in this equation, I know what the rate of disappearance of E is going to look like. So I've got the equation for dFe dW, and it gets formed in this one as min half the rate of A dash in reaction 2, and it gets used in that one plus RE3. Okay, so make sure that you understand the signs here. So this is I have a plus here, but if I substitute it finally, I'm going to have that negative. That is because normally for reactants, as you are used to now in CKN and in this course, we express the rate as the min, the rate of disappearance. So that's why that negative sign is there. Are you all comfortable with that? You practice that in CKN. That is my assumption. Give me a yes or a no. Just typing. I'm not going to give a poll. Yes. Okay. Thanks, Gareth. Right. So now who's going to be brave enough to say no? So this is not a good lecturing style. I apologize. You're welcome to contact me in private if you are unsure about anything that I said here, so that you don't have to feel shy to say that you don't understand. So what I would like to do now is to think about, could you please say again why it was min a half? Right, is that for E? So if I look at this equation, since the rate of A is given, right, it would be easier for me to understand this if I take all my stoichiometric numbers and I divide it by the same amount. So if I rewrite A like this, E plus 5F, and I divide everything there by 2. So I've got A that goes to half E plus 5F. Just to see how the rate of formation of E relates to this rate at which A disappears. Okay, so it's just making the stoichiometry easier. Right, a 5 over, oh my wordy there. Thank you very much, Fransu. She's with it early in the morning. Right. Does that make sense, Luca? So I just want to see how does E relate to that. Cool, there we go. Right, so what I want to show you today, I've got a few minutes left, is how I would go about setting up the differential equations if I do this in Python. And I'll show you this in some of the future lecture videos on the when we introduce the energy balance as well. So I'm going to open up a whiteboard. So maybe you can just say that I've got all these components. I've got A, B, C, D, E. I went a bit overboard with the amount of components. But okay, so I've got lots of components that of which the molar flow rates, for each of them, the molar flow rates will be changing along the length of my reactor. Okay, and I just start with pure A and B. This is still isothermal, so the temperature is not a variable, it is a constant. My mass, of course, is my independent variable. So if A, if B, if C, if E, if F and if G are all dependent variables. So as my independent variable changes, all of them are going to change. In addition, it's a packed bed reactor. So my pressure is going to change along the length. So here is another one. So I've got my pressure as well. So now I write my differential equations always in terms of molar flow rates, pressure, and later we are going to say, well, next week, very soon, how does the temperature change along the length of my reactor? So let's now just go to a whiteboard, and I'm going to show you just the way I build my equations. For some of you know, you don't have issues with where is the whiteboard? There. You will not have issues with this. So if you're bored, you are welcome to go and get some coffee and watch the recording later at double speed. Okay, so let's say we are now going to start. So you may want to have that slide open. So I'm going to define my differential equations or PBR or whatever you want to call it. And I am going to use solve IVP, so my independent variable must be first and then all my dependent variables. Of course, if you use ODE int, okay, and I see there, I'm going to have my DEs, then it's going to be the variables first and then my independent variable. So now I know I've got FA, FB, FC, okay, all my Fs, and I've got pressure, and these are all my variables. And the way I start then is to immediately say, listen, for each of them, I must now return a differential equation. So let me write my differential equation. So my dFA is going to be equal to RA1 dash plus RA2 dash. Right. And for B, my dFB is going to be equal to, and it just participates, so it is 1.5 times RA1 dash. And dFC, etc., etc. Okay, and for so the rates, that's, so I've got my mole balances there. And now I've got my dP, dW, and in here, let me say I've got a min K, and I'm going to use that form because of the Ergun equation. So it will be P naught over pressure, Ft over Ft naught, and temperature over temperature naught. That is going to cancel out. So I've got an equation there, and now I've said, all right, I've got this equation. Let me check unknowns in this equation. So I've got, oops-a-daisy, rates and rates. but I'm not scared. I see you use separate functions for your rates. You're welcome. You could also just write them in this function. So now that my rate 1 is going to be equal to min K1 CA CB to the power of 1.5, and I've got an equation for rate 2, and that is equal to min K2 K2 dash CA. Now, another dependent variable. So in other words, the rates, they are all dependent variables. They change with your mass flow rate. Concentration of A, concentration of B, those are dependent variables. But now I say, oh, I don't have them because they are not parameters that I've specified outside of my function. If I look at my K in this case, the rate constants, because it's isothermal, they are parameters outside of the function. The Ergun constant will be parameters outside of the function. But now I've got a problem with my CA and CB, but it's not a big problem, so I just add them. Add another line to my function. CA is going to be FA over Q. All right, happiness. And CB is going to FB over Q. Cool, let's see. I've got unknowns here, FA, FB, dependent variables, but for them I already have equations. I have my differential equations, but here another little one, step Q, pops up because it's a gas phase reaction. The pressure is changing, the number of moles is going to be changing. So I need an equation, an algebraic equation for Q. So Q is also a dependent variable. So I'm going to write Q here. And here I can use the ideal gas law. There's no gas but the ideal gas, and it's perfectly accurate enough, even at relatively high pressure reacting systems. So I FT RT over the pressure. Let's investigate. Do we have another dependent variable? For sure we do, because suddenly we have FE. Temperature is a constant, it's a parameter, so it's outside of the differential equation function. For my pressure, yes, it is wrong color. It is a dependent variable, but I have a differential equation for pressure. But I need one more equation for FT. I am not scared because FT is simply equal to FA plus FB plus FC, etc. All my equations there. Let's check. I've got all of them. Yes, they are there, dependent variables, but for each of them I have a differential equation. So this is the way I built. Some of you, I know, like to have this one as something for which you write a differential equation. Just be careful. FT changes, the pressure changes. So if you want to use dQdW is ddW of the whole ideal gas law, you must apply the quotient rule to say I've got like an F that's a function of W and a G that's a function of W to do that properly. And it's a fun exercise for those who have the capacity to try to see if they can get it correct. For me, it is just easier to use algebraic equations for Q. All right, so now you can go and count dependent and all the dependent variables and the number of equations. Because in fact, everything that we say, Q, dependent variable, CA, CB, all my concentrations will be dependent variables for some of them, for all the molar flow rates. So when we design reactors, all the molar flow rates and the temperature and the pressure, this is my recommendation, will be returned as differential equations along a packed bed reactor, and in a PFR this one is going to disappear because it is going to turn into a parameter or a design spec that's going to be outside of my function. But for all these flow rates, temperature, pressure in a packed bed reactor, differential equations. Okay, and temperature's differential equation you're going to be starting to work with next week. And then for the rest, for concentrations, rates, volumetric flow rate, we have algebraic equations to show how they change along the length of the reactor. Okay, questions on this? Are you still awake? Or have I lulled you asleep? Proof of life?
We are
Still
here.
awake. Oh, yay, thank you. All right, okay. Barely alive. Yes, I know. I think my colleagues are busy killing you. I'm not, I'm innocent in this whole exercise. All right, okay, so let me just now, I've heard it from many sources. I just want to say something more, because now often I ask you to plot concentrations. So if you now want to construct concentrations from this, so if I return this and now let's see if I've got some, yes, I've got some more space. If I now have my return function here, so return, and in the return, it is only going to return the differential equations. No. So whether I use solve IVP or if I use ODE-int, what I will be able to get, and use that dense output. I've got some videos that I try to explain to you how to use this dense output. Please ask again if you need more clarity on that. If we've got time in the lecture, we can go into that if you're still unsure about it. But I can generate array values for my Fs and my pressure and my temperature, everything that is returned here. But now I ask you to plot concentrations. But this is now, so the silly thing, or the inconvenient thing about having Q now, not as a differential equation, is that you are going to have to copy these equations outside of your loop if you want them then to be in array values. But that's it. If you copy all your algebraic equations and you've got arrays of all the variables that is now returned, suddenly you can calculate concentrations for all your, so you will get this from your differentiation, okay, using your differentiation, oh my word, wrong operation, from the numerical integration that Python performed, and then I can just copy all these algebraic equations, boom, over there, and it can use those parameters to calculate all the Q's, the concentrations, the rates, and I can plot whatever my heart desires against the other variables. And I know that there's going to be an equal match between the number of variables in a specific array. Good, so let's give some time for questions. Put your hands up if you are typing something, or speak to me if you want to use your words, your vocal cords. Ta-da! Going. Nothing. Okay, so either you are tired and half asleep. Please ask me again about this. Let me stop the recording.